If you're a dirt biker, then you know that proper fork oil levels are critical to your bike's performance. Too much or too little fork oil can lead to a variety of problems, including poor handling and wear and tear on your suspension components. So, how do you determine how much fork oil your bike needs? In this video, we'll walk you through the process. What is fork oil and what does it do for a dirt bike suspension system? A fork oil is a lubricating fluid made of base oil and additives. It's used in the damping mechanism of dirt bike forks to control oil flow and thereby damping rates. Dirt bike fork manufacturers usually ship their bikes with an open fork configuration, that is, one which allows air into the compression chamber to act as a spring. When the suspension compresses, air is compressed. As the forks are used, dirt and other particles may contaminate the fork oil. This causes the oil to become thinner in consistency because it's more easily compressible by suspension movement. Thinner fork oil can't damp out impacts as well as thicker fluid would, so riders who experience pogoing tend to change out their fork oil more frequently. Fork oil viscosity is rated in weight, which is normally shown as a number followed by Nw. For example, 10W indicates that the fork oil's weight is similar to that of water. Oil weight affects how quickly your suspension moves through its travel. 10W oils are thinner than 15W oils. But how much oil goes in a suspension fork of a dirt bike? As a rule of thumb, you should fill your fork tubes to about 90% of their capacity. This gives enough room for the fork oil to expand as it heats up, without being excessive. If you have more fork oil than needed, it can be drained off. If you need more, just top off with the appropriate type and weight before putting your bike away so that the oil will be at the proper level when you next ride. About 200 milliliters of oil is required per leg, but that is just an average guide for most forks, I'd say. But if you go by what the bike shop says, you can also buy fork oil in kits with pre-measured amounts of each type. This is especially handy if you've never done it before or aren't sure how much to put into your forks. Note that making adjustments to the amount of fork oil your bike uses will slow down or speed up the damping rate, which can have a dramatic effect on how it handles. If you're not sure about how to do it right, ask for help from someone with experience or take it to a mechanic. What happens if you put too much or too little fork oil on a dirt bike? There are a couple of things that can happen if you put too much fork oil on a dirt bike. First off, the front suspension will feel mushy and unresponsive. This is because there is so much fluid in there that it starts to push out on the seals, and this decreases your available travel. The second thing that might happen if you put too much fork oil on a dirt bike is that you could damage your front forks. If there is too much fluid in the forks, it will push past the seals and get into the brake system, which can cause some problems. This is where leaking fork seals come from. If you put too little fork oil on a dirt bike, the front suspension will feel harsh and not very smooth in how it works. You may have issues with bottoming out during use, which will cause damage to your forks in the long term. What is the right amount of fork oil for a dirt bike? The right amount of fork oil for a dirt bike really depends on what type of riding you're doing and what kind of forks your dirt bike has. The average range for an off-road motorcycle is anywhere from 300cc to 450cc per fork tube, but this can vary depending on motorcycle type and your personal preference. For example, if the manufacturer's recommendations say to put in 300cc per fork tube, you will want to put in a little bit more than that, most likely closer to 350cc or 360cc, because the ride quality will be better, and this means you can break it in easier. How often should you replace fork oil on a dirt bike? You should check and change your fork oil every 10 hours of use on an average dirt bike. This may vary depending on how hard you're riding and what kind of terrain you're riding. If the fork oil gets dirty too quickly, then it needs to be changed more frequently, like after every 5 hours or even 3 hours. Additionally, you should change the fork oil more often if the dirt bike is used for aggressive riding or racing, since this puts more strain on the front suspension. If your fork oil changes color and gets dirty quickly, it will need to be changed more frequently than 10 hours. Dirty and old fluid doesn't do anything good for your fork, so you should change it.